My name is Reed, and at 32, I still feel the sting of my mother's words from 2 years ago. I never thought my sister Amanda's wedding would be the last time I spoke to most of my family. When Mom said I had been a disappointment since birth, and my brother Tyler laughed along, something inside me finally broke. I walked out that night and never looked back. The next morning, Mom got a call that turned her face white. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you all are watching from and hit that subscribe button to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the family scapegoat. Growing up in suburban Boston, our family looked perfect from the outside. My father was a successful orthopedic surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, working long hours and commanding respect everywhere he went. My mother was a tenured English literature professor at Boston College, brilliant and exacting in equal measure. Our colonial-style house in Newton had 4 bedrooms, a manicured lawn, and hosted faculty dinner parties where intelligent conversation flowed as freely as the wine. But inside those pristine walls, a clear hierarchy existed among us 3 children. Amanda, 4 years my junior, was unquestionably the golden child. Her straight-A report cards were framed and displayed in the living room. Her violin recitals became family events that everyone was required to attend. When she was accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship, my mother threw a garden party and invited everyone in their social circle. Tyler, my brother who was born 2 years after me, occupied the comfortable middle position as the charming, charismatic child who could talk his way out of any trouble. His mediocre grades were dismissed with laughter about him being a people person, and his minor rebellions were treated as signs of a spirited personality. His quick wit made adults chuckle, and that skill alone seemed to compensate for any shortcomings in other areas. Then there was me, Reed, the eldest and the perpetual disappointment. I worked hard in school, maintaining a solid B+ average, but my mother only saw the A-minuses I missed. I played baseball and made varsity, but wasn't the star player. I was accepted to Boston University with a decent scholarship, but it wasn't an Ivy League. Every achievement I earned came with an asterisk, a qualification, a subtle reminder that it wasn't quite enough. I can still hear my mother's voice during my high school graduation dinner. "Why can't you be more like Amanda? She's already taking advanced placement classes, and she's only a freshman." The fact that I had just been named editor of the college newspaper went unmentioned. My father was physically present, but emotionally absent. His long hours at the hospital gave him a convenient excuse to stay removed from family dynamics. When he did witness my mother's critical comments, he would offer a weak carol, please, before retreating behind his newspaper or escaping to his study. His passive enabling was its own form of rejection. Throughout my childhood and teen years, I tried everything to win their approval. I joined clubs, volunteered, got summer internships, but each effort was met with tepid acknowledgement at best, active criticism at worst. During my sophomore year of college, I spent 3 months working on a photography project that won a regional contest. When I called home with the news, my mother responded, "That's nice, but doesn't photography seem more like a hobby than a career path?" Over time, this constant undermining eroded my sense of self-worth. I developed anxiety that manifested as insomnia before family visits. I became a people pleaser, constantly scanning rooms for signs of disapproval. I apologized excessively, even for things that weren't my fault. I doubted my own perceptions and decisions, second-guessing everything from my choice of clothes to my career aspirations. 6 years ago, after graduating from college, I made the decision to move to Chicago. The 800 miles between Boston and my new home provided room to breathe, to begin discovering who I was outside the suffocating role I'd been assigned in my family. I found a job at Meridian Marketing, a mid-sized firm where my design skills were actually appreciated. My boss, Lawrence, recognized my talent and gave me increasing responsibility with major clients. In Chicago, I slowly built a small circle of supportive friends who became my chosen family. Darius, my neighbor turned best friend, knew when to listen and when to push me out of my comfort zone. Alicia, a copywriter I met through work, became the sister I wished I had grown up with, celebrating my wins without jealousy or comparison. Photography, which had always been my passion, became a serious side project. I started a YouTube channel documenting urban architecture and street scenes in Chicago. It was small, but growing steadily. Each subscriber and positive comment helping to rebuild the confidence my family had systematically dismantled. I limited my visits to Boston to major holidays, keeping phone calls brief and superficial. I had crafted a life that felt increasingly authentic, even as I carried the weight of knowing my family still viewed me through the lens of their disappointment. I wasn't completely healed, but I was healing. I wasn't fully confident, but I was getting there. I was finding my way, one small step at a time, despite the map my family had tried to force into my hands. The wedding invitation arrived in March, a thick cream envelope with elegant calligraphy addressing me as Mr. Reed Anderson. Inside, the card announced the June wedding of Amanda Elizabeth Anderson and James William Harrington IV at the Greenfield Mountain Resort in Vermont. A handwritten note from Amanda was tucked inside. "Hope you can make it, big brother. It wouldn't be the same without you." My stomach tightened as I read it. The last family gathering had been Thanksgiving, where my mother had spent the entire meal questioning my career choices and lamenting my single status. The thought of a full wedding weekend filled me with dread, but I also felt the familiar pull of obligation. Amanda and I had never been close, but she wasn't directly responsible for my treatment. She had been raised to expect adoration, just as I had been raised to expect criticism. A week after receiving the invitation, Amanda called me. "Reed, you got the invitation, right? You haven't RSVP'd yet." Her voice held the slight impatience I recognized from childhood. "Yeah, I got it. I was just checking my work schedule before responding." She sighed. "You have to come. It would look bad if you weren't there. Mom and Dad are paying for everything, and James's family is very traditional. They expect to see a whole, happy family." The familiar guilt surged through me. "I'll be there," I promised, already regretting the words as they left my mouth. "Great! Tyler's bringing his new girlfriend. She's a pediatric surgeon. Can you believe it?" Mom is thrilled. Of course she was. The weeks before the wedding passed, in a blur of preparation. I bought an expensive crystal vase from their registry, ordered a new charcoal suit that cost nearly a full paycheck, and practiced small talk in front of my bathroom mirror. "Yes, I'm still in Chicago. The marketing firm is great. No, not seeing anyone serious right now." The 6-hour drive to Vermont gave me too much time to think. With each mile, my anxiety grew. By the time I pulled into the resort parking lot, my shoulders were up around my ears, and a headache pulsed behind my eyes. The Greenfield Mountain Resort was exactly what I expected from Amanda's choice. A 5-star property with panoramic mountain views, sprawling gardens, and a staff that appeared out of nowhere to carry my bags. Checking in at the front desk, I heard a familiar voice. "Reed, you finally made it." I turned to see my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, approaching with her husband Tom in tow. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd show up at all. My flight was delayed," I lied, not wanting to explain that I'd sat in my parked car for 20 minutes, gathering courage to come inside. "Well, you're here now. Everyone's gathering for drinks on the terrace before the rehearsal dinner. Your mother has been looking for you." The terrace was filled with family members I hadn't seen in years, along with strangers I assumed were James's relatives. I spotted Tyler immediately, his arm around a tall, elegant woman who must have been the pediatric surgeon. They were surrounded by a group of laughing people, Tyler holding court as usual. My mother spotted me before I could slip to the bar. "Reed, there you are." She air-kissed near my cheek, her perfume overwhelming. "You look tired. Have you been sleeping? And that suit looks a bit tight across the shoulders. Didn't you try it on before buying it?" "Hello, Mother. It's nice to see you too." She tugged at my sleeve. "Come meet James's parents. They're very influential in Boston legal circles. His father is a federal judge." The rehearsal dinner was a showcase of everyone's achievements except mine. Tyler's recent promotion at his investment firm was toasted. Amanda's completion of her master's degree while planning the wedding was applauded. When conversation briefly turned to me, my mother quickly redirected. Reed works in advertising or something like that. Amanda, tell everyone about your honeymoon plans. As plates were cleared, my mother cornered me again. I don't understand why you insist on staying in Chicago when all your connections are in Boston. Lawrence Williams is only giving you that job because he and your father were in the same fraternity. You could be doing so much more with your degree. The truth that Lawrence barely knew my father and had hired me based solely on my portfolio went unsaid. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. Later that night, I met James for the first time, without family hovering around. He seemed genuinely nice, if somewhat reserved. Amanda speaks highly of your creative eye, he said, surprising me. She showed me your photography website. You've got real talent. It was perhaps the first sincere compliment I'd received from anyone connected to my family in years. Back in my hotel room, I called Darius, needing to hear a friendly voice. How bad is it? He asked without preamble. About what you'd expect. Mother criticized my appearance within 30 seconds of seeing me. Tyler's girlfriend is basically perfect. Amanda's being Amanda. Listen to me, Darius said firmly. You're not that scared kid anymore. You don't need their approval. You're good at what you do. People who actually know you respect you, and you don't have to accept their narrative. I know, I said, not entirely convincingly. Promise me something, Darius continued. If it gets too much, you'll stand up for yourself. You don't have to cause a scene, but you don't have to be their punching bag either. I promised, not knowing how prophetic his words would prove to be. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to focus on getting through the next 2 days with my dignity intact. I made a silent promise to myself to stay positive despite everything, to not let the old dynamics pull me back into the person I used to be. For Amanda's sake, I would try to make this weekend go smoothly. For my own sake, I would remember that I had built a life that mattered, regardless of whether my family could see its value. The morning of Amanda's wedding arrived with picture-perfect weather-blue skies, mild temperatures, and a gentle breeze that seemed almost suspiciously accommodating. I woke early, my night of fitful sleep leaving me gritty-eyed but resigned to getting through the day. By 8:30, I found myself enlisted in the army of last-minute problem solvers that accompany any wedding. My mother, already dressed in her pale blue mother of the bride outfit but not yet wearing her makeup, spotted me in the hotel lobby and immediately put me to work. Reed, thank goodness. The florist delivered the wrong-colored ribbon for the ceremony chairs. They're cream instead of ivory. You need to run into town and find something suitable. She pressed a swatch of fabric into my hand. It needs to match this exactly. When I returned an hour later, successful against all odds in my ribbon-hunting expedition, my mother barely acknowledged the effort. Just give them to the coordinator, and then check if the photographer has arrived. Tyler is helping James with his cufflinks, and your father is greeting the important guests. The morning continued in this fashion. I was dispatched to handle problems no one else wanted to deal with, while simultaneously being reminded that my contributions weren't particularly valuable. The wedding coordinator kept confusing me with a staff member, an understandable mistake given the way my family treated me. Despite everything, I found myself wanting the day to go well for Amanda's sake. Whatever our complicated relationship, she was my sister, and this was her day. When I finally saw her in her wedding dress, I felt a genuine surge of brotherly affection. You look beautiful, Amanda, I told her, meaning it. For a brief moment, the poised bride facade dropped, and I glimpsed the little sister who used to follow me around when we were very small, before our roles had been so rigidly defined. Thanks, Reed. I'm glad you're here. She squeezed my hand, and for that moment, the effort of coming felt worthwhile. The ceremony itself was exactly what you would expect from a couple like Amanda and James. Traditional, elegant, and meticulously planned. Standing in the fourth row of family seating, Tyler was best man, of course, I watched my sister begin her new life. My emotions were complicated, a mixture of happiness for her, memories of our distant childhood, and the ever-present awareness of my outsider status in our family. As the ceremony concluded, and the guests moved toward the reception area, I found myself swept along in a tide of well-dressed strangers. The ballroom had been transformed into a vision of crystal white flowers and subtle lighting. A string quartet played quietly as servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvre. When it came time to be seated for dinner, I discovered I had been placed at table 19, far from the head table and populated by distant cousins, elderly great-aunts, and what appeared to be clients of my father, who hadn't quite warranted a better placement, but couldn't be excluded entirely. "You're Carol and Robert's oldest, aren't you?" asked an elderly woman I vaguely recognized as my grandmother's cousin. "What was your name again? Rick?" "Reed," I corrected gently. "That's right, Reed. You're the one who moved away. What do you do again?" Before I could answer, another distant relative joined in. "He does something with computers, don't you, dear?" Or was it accounting? "I'm a graphic designer," I explained, the explanation feeling well worn after years of repetition. "I work for a marketing firm in Chicago." "Oh," said the first woman, clearly disappointed by the lack of prestige. "Tyler's in finance, isn't he? And doing very well from what I hear." After dinner came the speeches. As the oldest sibling, I had prepared a brief toast about Amanda's determination and intelligence. I'd spent hours writing and rewriting it, wanting to strike the right balance of warmth and sincerity without revealing too much of our complicated relationship. Tyler spoke first, naturally. His speech was charming, funny, and peppered with inside jokes that had the crowd roaring with laughter. He told stories about Amanda's perfectionism as a child, her academic achievements, and how she had finally met someone as brilliant and driven as herself in James. When my turn came, I stepped up to the microphone with my carefully prepared notes. I spoke about Amanda's perseverance, her clarity of purpose, and how she had always known what she wanted. I wished her and James happiness and success in their marriage. It was heartfelt, if somewhat restrained, an accurate reflection of our relationship. The applause was polite, but nothing like the enthusiastic response Tyler had received. As I returned to my seat, I caught my mother's expression from the head table, a mix of relief that I hadn't embarrassed them, and disappointment that I hadn't somehow been more impressive. As the evening progressed, the open bar became my refuge. I wasn't drinking heavily, knowing that would only invite criticism, but having a glass in my hand gave me a reason to stand slightly apart from the swirl of conversations where I never quite belonged. I noticed my mother growing increasingly animated as she consumed more champagne, her gestures wider, her laugh louder. She moved from table to table, the perfect hostess, but I could see the strain around her eyes, the slightly too tight smile that indicated she was monitoring everyone's experience, including her own. My father remained stoic and pleasant, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, as though his daughter's wedding were a successful surgery he had just completed. Tyler circulated between his girlfriend, James's attractive female relatives, and groups of my parents' friends, his charisma on full display. A series of small incidents throughout the evening reinforced my outsider status. An old family friend asked if I was still trying to make a go of that art thing. My father introduced me to his colleague as our son, who lives in Chicago, without mentioning my name. A cousin commented that I was looking better than expected, with a surprise that suggested the bar had been set remarkably low. Each comment was minor on its own, the kind of slight that would sound petty if I tried to explain it to someone who hadn't experienced the cumulative effect of such remarks over a lifetime. But together, they formed a familiar pattern, a tapestry of small rejections that I had grown up believing I deserved. By 10:30, I needed a break from the noise and the forced smiles. I drifted toward the edge of the reception, finding a quiet corner near the bar where I could regroup before diving back in for the final hour or two of celebration. I was nursing a club soda, having switched from wine earlier, when I overheard my mother's voice from just around the corner. "Amanda looks absolutely radiant," I heard my mother saying to what sounded like a group of her friends. "James is exactly the kind of man we always hoped she'd find." His family connections alone will open so many doors for her. You must be so proud, said a female voice I didn't recognize. Both your children doing so well. I knew I should walk away. But something kept me rooted to the spot. There was a pause, and I could almost visualize my mother's expression, her head tilted slightly, lips pursed in that way that indicated she was choosing her words carefully. Well, Tyler and Amanda have certainly exceeded our expectations, she said, her voice warm with genuine pride. Tyler's just made junior partner at his firm, youngest in the company's history. And you know about Amanda's research fellowship. What about your oldest? Reed, isn't it? Asked another voice. There was a slight pause. Reed has always been different. The way she said it made different sound like a terminal diagnosis. Someone in the group laughed sympathetically. Every family has one, don't they? At least Amanda wasn't a failure like Reed, my mother continued, her voice slightly slurred from champagne but no less cutting. Even his birth ruined my life. 36 hours of labor, and I nearly died. He's been disappointing me ever since. The words hit me like a physical blow, forcing the air from my lungs. I had always suspected my mother felt this way, but hearing it stated so plainly, so casually, was different. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment comment during an argument. This was how she spoke about me when I wasn't present to family friends at my sister's wedding. Before I could move, I heard Tyler's laugh joining the conversation. Mom, you're being too kind. Remember when Reed thought he was going to be a professional photographer? He spent all that money on equipment just to take pictures of buildings. Oh, Tyler, don't be cruel, my mother said, but her tone held amusement rather than reproof. I'm just saying what we're all thinking, Tyler continued. Some people just don't have what it takes to make something of themselves. Not everyone can be a success story. I stood frozen, the club soda in my hand forgotten as their words washed over me. All those years of trying to earn approval, of doubting myself, of believing there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unworthy of the love my siblings received so easily, suddenly clarified into a single, undeniable truth. Nothing I did would ever be enough, because the problem had never been my achievements. The problem was me. My very existence was viewed as a burden, a disappointment, a mistake. I don't remember consciously deciding to confront them. One moment I was standing in shock, the next I was rounding the corner to face the small group. My mother stood with 3 of her college friends and Tyler, all holding champagne flutes and looking startled at my sudden appearance. Reed, my mother said, recovering quickly. We were just talking about the ceremony. Wasn't it lovely? No, you weren't, I said quietly. You were talking about what a disappointment I've been since birth, about how I've been a failure my entire life. My mother's face flushed. You're being oversensitive as usual. I was simply explaining to my friends that you've chosen a different path than your siblings. I heard every word, I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. I heard how my birth ruined your life, how I've been disappointing you ever since. Tyler stepped forward, his expression a practiced mix of concern and condescension. Come on, big brother, you're making a scene. Mom's had a few drinks. Everyone says things they don't mean at weddings. Do they? I looked directly at him. Or do alcohol and emotional occasions just reveal what people really think? My mother's expression hardened, the mask of the gracious hostess slipping to reveal the criticism that always lurked beneath. This is exactly the problem, Reed. Everything is always about you and your feelings. It's your sister's wedding day, and somehow you're finding a way to make it about your hurt feelings. This is why you've never accomplished anything significant. You're too caught up in yourself. Her words should have hurt. But strangely, they didn't. For the first time, I could see them for what they were, not truth, but her truth, colored by whatever disappointment or resentment she had carried since before I was old enough to have any control over her happiness. You're right about one thing, I said, feeling calmer than I had in years. This is Amanda's wedding day. She deserves to celebrate without family drama. So I'm going to leave. Don't be ridiculous, my mother hissed. People will talk. Let them, I replied. I'm done caring what people think. Especially people who have never seen me clearly. Tyler snorted. Always so dramatic. This is why no one takes you seriously. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the golden child I had envied, but someone whose identity was built on comparison and hierarchy. I hope you find happiness, Tyler. Real happiness. Not just the appearance of success. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away. My steps measured and deliberate. I didn't storm out or make a scene. I simply left. My decision as quiet as it was absolute. In my hotel room, I packed methodically, placing each item in my suitcase with unusual care. The process felt almost ceremonial, as though I was packing away not just clothes, but an entire identity, the dutiful son, the disappointing brother, the perpetual failure. That version of Reed Anderson would stay behind when I left. I wrote a brief note to Amanda, apologizing for missing the rest of her celebration but not explaining why. She deserved at least that much consideration. I left her gift on the desk with the note and took one last look around the room to ensure I hadn't forgotten anything. The night was clear and cool as I carried my suitcase to the car. The sounds of the reception music and laughter drifted from the ballroom, creating a surreal soundtrack to my departure. I drove through the resort gates at 11:45, feeling both utterly broken and strangely liberated. My phone began buzzing almost immediately, messages from my mother, from Tyler, even one from my father. I silenced it and focused on the dark road ahead. I drove for 3 hours, before exhaustion forced me to stop at a roadside hotel just across the Massachusetts border. As I checked in, the desk clerk gave me an odd look. Rough night? I realized I was still wearing my wedding clothes, though I had removed the tie and jacket. Something like that. Well, get some rest. Things usually look better in the morning. I wasn't sure that would be true this time, but I nodded anyway. In the anonymous quiet of the hotel room, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. The raw pain of my mother's words, the finality of my decision to walk away, the uncertainty of what would come next. I turned on my phone long enough to text Darius. Left the wedding. We'll explain later. I'm okay. Then I turned it off again, unwilling to face the barrage of messages I knew would be waiting. Whatever consequences would come from my actions, they would still be there in the morning. For now, I needed to rest. The morning light filtering through cheap hotel curtains brought no clarity, just the dull headache of emotional exhaustion. My phone showed 43 missed calls, 67 text messages, and 22 voicemails. I scrolled through the texts, most from my mother, ranging from angry, "How dare you embarrass us like this?" to manipulative, "Your sister is devastated," to threatening, "Your father and I have supported you financially for years. Don't think there won't be consequences." Amid the digital onslaught, one message from a number I didn't recognize caught my attention. "Reed, this is James. Something you should know. A guest overheard what happened and told me. He says he's a friend of your boss, Lawrence. He called your mom this morning and told her you've been offered a position at Visionary Design in New York. Said your mother turned white as a sheet. Thought you should know. For what it's worth, I think you deserved better treatment." The message hit me like a thunderbolt. I had been planning to share my good news at the wedding, a prestigious job offer from one of the top design firms in the country, the kind of career achievement that even my parents couldn't diminish. I had imagined, foolishly perhaps, that this might finally earn their respect. Now the news had reached them in the worst possible way, undermining their narrative about me at the exact moment I had finally walked away from their judgment. I didn't respond to any messages. Instead, I showered, changed into jeans and a t-shirt from my overnight bag, and checked out of the hotel. The 8-hour drive back to Chicago passed in a blur of gas station coffee and public radio, my mind alternating between stunned disbelief at what had happened and a growing sense of resolve about what needed to happen next. By Sunday evening, I was back in my apartment, the familiar surroundings both comforting and somehow different, as though I had returned from a much longer journey than a weekend wedding. I called Darius, who came over immediately with takeout food and patient silence until I was ready to talk. "So you really just walked out?" he asked when I finished recounting the weekend. I did. After 32 years of trying to be good enough, I finally accepted that was never going to happen. "What now?" "I don't know exactly," I admitted. "But I'm not going back to that life. I can't." The week that followed was surreal. I returned to work on Monday to find that news of my job offer had already reached the office. Lawrence called me into his office immediately. "So, New York, huh?" he said without preamble. "I was going to tell you today," I explained. "I just got the formal offer on Friday." He waved away my apology. "I'm not surprised they want you. You're one of the best designers I've ever worked with." He leaned forward. "Look, I don't normally get involved in personal matters, but my cousin Philip was at that wedding. He called me. What happened with your family? It wasn't right." The simple validation from someone outside the situation nearly undid me. I had spent so long doubting my own perceptions, wondering if I was indeed too sensitive, too needy, too demanding of affection that my family couldn't or wouldn't provide. Having an objective observer confirm that my treatment had been unfair felt like permission to trust my own experience. "Thank you," I said simply. "So when do you start at Visionary?" "They wanted me to start in 4 weeks. Is that enough notice?" "We'll make it work. You deserve this opportunity." That evening, I formally accepted the position at Visionary Design. The decision felt right, a clean break, a fresh start, a chance to build a life completely separate from the shadow of family expectation. I began making lists, property management companies in New York, movers, items to sell versus pack. The methodical planning gave me a sense of control amid the emotional chaos. Throughout the week, the attempts at contact from my family continued unabated. I ignored all of them until Wednesday, when I finally listened to one voicemail from my father. "Reed, this is your father. Your mother is very upset. Whatever disagreement you had, leaving the wedding was extremely disrespectful to your sister. We need to discuss this like adults. Call me back." Not a word about what my mother had said. No acknowledgement of the hurt beneath my actions. Just concern about appearances and a directive to fall back in line. I deleted the message without returning the call. On Friday, I found a small apartment in Brooklyn through a colleague's recommendation, an overpriced one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, available for immediate occupancy. I put down a deposit sight unseen, the recklessness of the decision feeling like a small act of rebellion against my normally cautious nature. The following week, I began the process of dismantling my Chicago life. I sold furniture, canceled services, packed books and clothes and camera equipment. I gave notice at my apartment and arranged for movers. Each step felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like jumping from a plane not entirely sure your parachute will open but thrilled by the freefall nonetheless. 2 weeks after the wedding, I finally answered a call from Amanda. I owed her that much, at least. "Reed?" Her voice sounded smaller than usual, uncertain. "Are you okay? No one's heard from you." "I'm fine," I assured her. "I'm sorry for leaving your wedding early. What happened?" "Mom said you had too much to drink and got upset over nothing." I wasn't surprised by the spin my mother had put on events. "That's not what happened, Amanda. But I don't want to put you in the middle. Tyler said you overheard Mom saying something about you being a disappointment and you overreacted." I closed my eyes, gathering patience. "I heard Mom say that my birth ruined her life, and I've been disappointing her ever since." Tyler joined in. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, and it wasn't an overreaction." There was a long silence. She was probably just stressed about the wedding. "This isn't new, Amanda. It's been my entire life. I've just finally decided I don't have to accept it anymore." Another pause. "So what? You're just done with all of us? Forever?" "I don't know about forever, but right now, I need space. I've accepted a job in New York. I'm moving next week." "New York?" Her voice rose in surprise. "Since when?" "I've been interviewing for a while. It's a good opportunity. And you weren't going to tell any of us? I was going to announce it at your wedding, actually. Ironic, isn't it? The conversation ended without resolution. Amanda torn between family loyalty and a dawning recognition that something significant had happened. I felt sad, but also relieved at having stated my truth calmly and clearly, without anger or accusation. The day I left Chicago was bright and clear, the kind of perfect early summer day that usually filled me with optimism. Darius helped me load the last few boxes into my car. Everything else had gone with the movers 2 days earlier. "You sure about this?" he asked, not for the first time. "I'm sure about needing to leave," I answered honestly. "The rest I'll figure out as I go." He hugged me tightly. "Call me when you get there. And remember what I'm always telling you, you're worth more than they ever made you believe." The drive to New York took 14 hours with stops, giving me plenty of time to second-guess every decision I'd ever made. By the time I pulled up in front of my new building in Brooklyn, exhaustion had temporarily overwhelmed anxiety. The apartment was smaller than it had appeared in photos, with questionable plumbing and a view of the building next door. But it was mine alone, free from expectations or judgments or the weight of family history. That first night in New York, sitting on a camping mattress because my furniture wouldn't arrive until the next day, eating pizza from a box balanced on my knees, I experienced a moment of pure panic. What had I done? Had I overreacted? Would I regret burning these bridges when I was older and alone? But beneath the fear was something else, a quiet certainty that for the first time in my life, I was making choices based on my own needs rather than the hopeless quest for approval I would never receive. Whatever came next would be my life, not the half-life I had been living in the shadow of family judgment. My first 6 months in New York were both harder and more rewarding than I could have imagined. The city itself was overwhelming, a constant assault of noise, movement, and humanity that made Chicago seem positively quaint by comparison. My tiny apartment became both sanctuary and prison during those early weeks as I adjusted to the frenetic pace of life in Brooklyn. Visionary design lived up to its prestigious reputation. The workload was intense, the expectations high, and the creative challenges stimulating. My colleagues were talented and driven, most of them younger than me, and seemingly fearless in their creative choices. I felt simultaneously out of my depth and exhilarated by the opportunity to prove myself in this demanding environment. My direct supervisor, Elaine, was tough but fair, pushing me to take risks with my designs while providing the kind of specific, constructive feedback I had never received from my family. After one particularly grueling project that had required 3 all-nighters to complete, she called me into her office. "This campaign is excellent work, Reed," she said, reviewing my designs for a major athletic brand. "You've got serious talent, but you second-guess yourself too much. Trust your instincts more." Her matter-of-fact assessment my strengths acknowledged alongside areas for improvement delivered without emotional manipulation or comparison to others was refreshingly straightforward. I began to understand how professional relationships were supposed to work, based on actual performance rather than predetermined roles or emotional agendas. Gradually, I began building a life outside work. I explored neighborhoods on weekends, camera in hand, documenting the architectural contrasts and street scenes that made New York unique. I continued posting to my YouTube channel, which began attracting more followers as I featured New York's less photographed corners and perspectives. Making friends proved harder than in Chicago. New Yorkers were friendly but busy, everyone's calendar packed weeks in advance. But slowly, I developed a small circle of connections. There was Zach from the coffee shop downstairs, who turned out to be a fellow Midwesterner and photographer. Maria, a graphic designer who freelanced for Visionary, introduced me to her regular happy hour group of creative professionals. Marcus, my neighbor across the hall, invited me to a pickup basketball game that became a Sunday tradition. None of these relationships had the depth of my friendship with Darius yet, but they were genuine connections based on shared interests rather than obligation or history. For the first time, I was building relationships as the person I actually was, not the person I had been trained to believe I should be. Throughout these months of adjustment and growth, my mother's contact attempts continued with decreasing frequency but increasing desperation. Initially, the messages came daily, alternating between guilt trips, anger, and occasional uncomfortable attempts at maternal concern. Read. This silent treatment is childish and hurtful. Your father and I deserve better than this, after all we've done for you. If you're having some kind of breakdown, you need to let us help you. By the third month, the messages had dwindled to weekly check-ins, their tone shifting subtly. Your cousin Sarah asked about you at dinner. I didn't know what to tell her. The holidays are coming up. You need to let us know your plans. I saw your YouTube video about Brooklyn. The photography was quite good. That last message almost broke my resolve. The tiny crumb of approval, so long sought and so rarely offered, activated old patterns of hope and yearning. But I recognized it for what it was. Not genuine appreciation, but a tactical adjustment, a new strategy to regain control now that criticism had failed. In the 6th month after the wedding, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Read. My mother's voice. I'm glad you picked up. I said nothing, waiting. This has gone on long enough, she continued, her tone brisk and practical. Whatever you think you heard at the wedding, I'm sure it was taken out of context. You need to get over this and resume your family responsibilities. Hello to you too, Mother, I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. I didn't think I heard anything. I know exactly what was said, and so do you. People say all sorts of things they don't mean at emotional events like weddings. You're being unreasonable holding on to this grudge. It's not a grudge. It's a boundary. She made a dismissive sound. Boundaries. Is that what your therapist calls it? The comment was so predictable I almost laughed. Of course she would assume I was in therapy, and of course she would dismiss it as indulgent navel-gazing rather than necessary healing. Yes, actually, I said, because it happened to be true. I had started therapy 2 months after moving to New York, finally ready to unpack the damage of growing up as the family scapegoat. My therapist calls it a healthy recognition that I deserve basic respect and kindness, and that I don't have to accept treatment that undermines my self-worth. We've always wanted what's best for you, she said, switching tactics. Everything we did was to help you reach your potential. I know you believe that, I replied. But it's not true, and I'm not having this conversation right now. I need more time. I ended the call feeling shaky, but proud of maintaining my boundaries. My therapist, Dr. Levine, had helped me understand that my family's dysfunction wasn't my fault, that the roles we had been assigned, golden child, scapegoat, enabler, were about the family system, not about our inherent worth as individuals. Your mother is threatened by your independence, Dr. Levine had explained. She's trying every strategy she knows to pull you back into the old dynamic because your absence disrupts the family system. Stay steady and clear about what you need. A week after that phone call with my mother, I had an unexpected encounter that tested my newfound strength. I was leaving a client meeting in Midtown when I heard a familiar voice call my name. Reed? Reed Anderson? I turned to see Tyler standing on the sidewalk outside an upscale restaurant, dressed in an expensive suit and looking as confident as ever. I thought that was you, he said, approaching with the easy smile that had always charmed everyone around him. What are the odds? I'm in town for a conference. Tyler, I acknowledged, unsure how to proceed. How are you? Good. Busy with work. Just made full partner, actually. He delivered this information casually, but his eyes watched for my reaction, the familiar dynamic of achievement and comparison, asserting itself even on a Manhattan sidewalk. Congratulations, I said simply. An awkward pause followed, as pedestrians streamed around us. So, Tyler finally said, "You're really doing this, huh? The whole new life? Cutting off the family thing?" "I'm living my life, yes." He shook his head. "Look, I know Mom can be harsh sometimes, but she means well. You've always been too sensitive about this stuff. And there it was, the dismissal of my experience. The subtle suggestion that the problem was my perception rather than their behavior. 6 months earlier, I would have doubted myself, wondered if he was right. Now I simply felt sad for him, still trapped in the family mythology where his worth depended on being better than Reed. I'm not interested in having this conversation on the street, Tyler. At least talk to Mom, he pushed. She's not doing great with all this. Dad says her blood pressure is up, and she's not sleeping well. The guilt tactic, right on schedule. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope she feels better soon. Tyler looked frustrated by my lack of engagement. You know, some people would kill for the family you're throwing away. Not everyone gets the advantages we had growing up. You're right, I agreed, surprising him. I was incredibly privileged in many ways. But emotional abuse is still abuse, even when it happens in a nice house with plenty of food and good schools. His face flushed. Abuse? That's a little dramatic, don't you think? So Mom and Dad were tough on you. So what? It made you stronger. I checked my watch. I need to get back to work. It was interesting seeing you, Tyler. Take care of yourself. As I walked away, he called after me. She's still your mother, Reed. You can't just pretend we don't exist. I didn't turn around, but his words followed me back to my office. Was I being unreasonable? Was I overreacting to what many would consider normal family tensions? The old doubts threatened to resurface, but I pushed them aside. My experience was valid. My pain was real. My boundaries were necessary. That night, I channeled my churning emotions into my photography, spending hours editing footage for my YouTube channel. The process had always been therapeutic for me. The focus on light and composition and narrative, forcing my mind away from rumination. When I finally posted the new video, a meditation on the contrast between public and private spaces in urban environments, it quickly became my most viewed piece yet. The comment section filled with responses from viewers who connected with the theme of looking beyond surface appearances. One comment in particular caught my attention. You captured exactly how it feels to present one face to the world while living something completely different behind closed doors. Thank you for seeing this and showing it so beautifully. The validation from strangers who had no agenda, who weren't obligated to praise or criticize me, felt more genuine than any feedback I had received growing up. My channel continued to grow, becoming a meaningful creative outlet and eventually a modest second income stream as sponsorship opportunities emerged. As fall turned to winter, I declined the inevitable Thanksgiving invitation from my parents, choosing instead to spend the holiday with Maria and her extended family, who welcomed me with easy warmth and genuine interest in my life. Christmas brought another round of guilt-inducing messages from my mother and a surprise card from Amanda, with a neutral note about hoping I was well. I sent Amanda a text in response, wishing her happy holidays and asking about her life in carefully general terms. Our cautious communication continued sporadically over the next few months, neither of us mentioning our parents or the wedding incident directly. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, more like a tentative recognition that adult siblings might find their own relationship independent of family history. As the 1-year mark of my departure from the wedding approached, I realized I had built something I had never quite believed possible. A life that felt authentically mine, filled with work that challenged me, creative pursuits that fulfilled me, and relationships that supported rather than undermined me. The constant background noise of anxiety and self-doubt hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had diminished to a level that felt manageable rather than debilitating. I still had moments of sadness about the family relationships I had lost, or perhaps had never really had. But those moments no longer derailed me or sent me spiraling into self-recrimination. They were simply part of my story, one thread in the complex tapestry of experiences that had shaped me but no longer defined me. 2 years after walking out of Amanda's wedding, my life in New York had taken root and flourished in ways I couldn't have imagined on that painful night. My position at Visionary Design had evolved into a creative director role, leading a team of younger designers and mentoring them with the kind of supportive guidance I had never received. My photography channel had grown to over 100,000 subscribers, generating enough income to fund regular weekend excursions throughout the Northeast to capture new content. Most significantly, I had built a relationship with Jamie, a museum curator I met at a gallery opening. Our connection had developed slowly and naturally over coffee dates and photography walks, conversations about art and family, and the peculiar energy of New York. After a year together, we decided to move into a larger apartment in Park Slope, combining our books and art, and creating a home that felt like a true reflection of both of us. On a personal level, the healing work continued. Therapy had helped me recognize and begin to unravel the complex web of beliefs I had internalized growing up. The conviction that I was inherently flawed, that love had to be earned through achievement, that my needs and feelings were less important than others. These revelations weren't always comfortable, but they were necessary for building a healthier relationship with myself and with others. My relationship with my family remained complicated. I had maintained my distance from my parents, responding to occasional messages with brief, neutral replies but declining invitations to visit or reconnect in person. The space had allowed me to strengthen my sense of self without the constant undermining of their criticism and expectations. Then, 18 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected email from Amanda. Unlike her previous messages, which had been careful and superficial, this one felt different from the first line. Read, "I owe you an apology. I didn't understand what happened at my wedding, or rather, I didn't want to understand because it would mean acknowledging some painful truths about our family. I'm ready to listen now, if you're willing to talk." I stared at the message for a long time before responding, uncertain whether this was a genuine olive branch or another attempt to pull me back into old patterns. After discussing it with Jamie and Dr. Levine, I agreed to a video call with Amanda the following weekend. When her face appeared on my screen, I was struck by how much older she looked, not in years but in experience. The perfectly polished facade she had always maintained showed subtle cracks. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," she began. "I wasn't sure you would." "What changed?" I asked directly. "What made you reach out now?" She took a deep breath. "James and I have been in couples counseling. Some issues came up between us, nothing major, but enough that we wanted help navigating them. In the process, I started recognizing patterns from our family that I was bringing into my marriage. The therapist suggested I might benefit from individual sessions too." She paused, looking uncomfortable but determined. "My therapist helped me see how Mom and Dad treated us differently, how they made you the scapegoat while Tyler and I got to be the successful ones. I didn't want to see it before because it benefited me. I'm sorry, Reed. I should have stood up for you." Her words touched something deep inside me, a wound I had carried so long I had almost stopped noticing its presence. "Thank you for saying that," I managed, my voice tight with unexpected emotion. "It means a lot." "I miss my brother," she said simply. "The real one, not the version of you our parents tried to create. I'd like to get to know who you actually are, if you're open to that." The conversation marked the beginning of a careful rebuilding between us. We started with weekly video calls, gradually sharing more of our authentic selves than our childhood roles had ever permitted. I learned about her struggles with perfectionism and anxiety, the pressure she felt to maintain the golden child image. She learned about my creative work, my relationship with Jamie, my growing confidence in my own voice. 3 months after our first real conversation, Amanda came to New York for a weekend visit. Jamie and I showed her our favorite restaurants and hidden city spots, and she attended a gallery opening, featuring some of my photography. Standing in front of my images, she said quietly, "You always saw things differently than the rest of us. I understand now that was your strength, not your flaw." With Tyler, the reconnection was more complicated. He reached out several times with superficial invitations to meet if he was in New York for business, each contact carrying the subtle implication that I should be grateful for his willingness to overlook my dramatic exit from family life. I declined politely but firmly, unwilling to re-enter a relationship that showed no signs of having evolved beyond our old dynamic. The most difficult situation involved my parents, particularly when my mother experienced a health scare, a minor heart episode that required brief hospitalization. Amanda called to inform me, careful to present the information without pressure about how I should respond. "She's stable and expected to recover fully," she assured me. "I just thought you should know." "Thank you for telling me," I said, genuinely appreciative of her straightforward approach. "Is there anything I can do from here?" "Just take care of yourself," Amanda replied. "That's all I wanted to say." I sent flowers to the hospital with a simple card, wishing my mother a speedy recovery. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was an acknowledgement of our connection, however damaged. To my surprise, my father called a few days later. "Reed," he said, his voice sounding older than I remembered. "Thank you for the flowers. Your mother appreciated them. How is she doing?" I asked. "Better. Coming home tomorrow." He cleared his throat. "This situation has made her reflective." Made both of us reflective, I suppose. I waited, unsure where the conversation was heading. "I wasn't a good father to you," he continued, the admission clearly difficult for him. "I let your mother's treatment of you continue because it was easier than confronting it. That was wrong." I had imagined some version of this conversation many times over the past 2 years, but now that it was happening, I found myself without a script. "Yes," I finally said. "It was. I don't know if we can fix things between us," he said, "but I wanted you to know that I see it now. Too late probably, but I see it." The conversation didn't lead to an immediate reconciliation. 2 phone calls over 2 years couldn't undo 3 decades of damage. But it opened a door that had seemed permanently closed, creating space for the possibility of a different kind of relationship in the future, one based on honest acknowledgement rather than pretense. My mother's attempts at connection remained more problematic. Even after her health scare, she struggled to take responsibility for her actions or acknowledge the pain she had caused. Her messages still contained subtle digs and passive-aggressive comments designed to provoke guilt or defensive reactions. I maintained firm boundaries, limiting contact to occasional brief exchanges and redirecting any attempts to pull me back into unhealthy patterns. Dr. Levine helped me understand that some relationships can't be fully repaired. Some wounds run too deep. Some patterns are too entrenched. Some people are too committed to their narratives to change in meaningful ways. The realization was painful but also freeing. I could acknowledge my mother's limitations without taking responsibility for them. I could wish her well without subjecting myself to continued harm. As the 2nd anniversary of my wedding departure approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. The terrified, wounded man who had driven away from that Vermont resort in the middle of the night had become someone I barely recognized, someone who trusted his perceptions, who spoke his truth calmly but firmly, who had built a life based on genuine connection rather than desperate approval-seeking. Walking away had saved me. Not in a dramatic, Hollywood movie kind of way, but in the quiet, gradual way that good decisions compound over time, creating space for growth and healing. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been panic attacks and sleepless nights, moments of doubt and guilt and loneliness. But there had also been discovery and connection and joy in larger measures than I had believed possible. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. I could release my anger toward my family without resuming relationships that were fundamentally unhealthy. I could acknowledge the positive things they had provided materially, educationally, while also honoring the emotional harm that had been done. Most importantly, I had learned that family isn't defined by blood but by love and respect. The people who had shown up for me during these 2 years of transformation, my friends in Chicago, my colleagues at Visionary, Jamie, even my therapist, had demonstrated more genuine care than those who shared my DNA. They had seen me, the real me, and found me worthy of connection exactly as I was. On the actual anniversary of the wedding, Jamie and I took the day off and spent it hiking in the Hudson Valley, my camera capturing the spectacular autumn foliage. Standing on an overlook with the river winding below us, I felt a profound sense of peace and self-acceptance that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. "Happy anniversary," Jamie said, squeezing my hand. "Not of the wedding, but of the day you chose yourself." That night, looking through the photos I had taken, I was struck by a particular image, a path through vibrant fall trees, winding toward distant mountains. It seemed to perfectly capture my journey from pain to possibility, from constraint to freedom. I posted it to my channel with a simple caption, "Sometimes the bravest thing is walking away." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooding in from viewers, sharing their own stories of difficult family dynamics and courageous boundaries. Their words reminded me that my experience, while unique in its details, reflected a universal struggle, the challenge of becoming truly ourselves in the face of others' expectations and judgments. If you've stayed with me through this story, I want to thank you. Perhaps you recognized elements of your own family in mine. Maybe you're struggling with similar decisions about boundaries and self-worth. If so, I hope my experience offers some comfort or clarity. Remember that walking away doesn't have to mean closing the door forever. It can simply create the space needed for healing and growth. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember that your worth isn't determined by anyone else's ability to see it.